Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Here we are at it was episode 5 now, aren't we? Yeah. And is good coffee but fake beans?
Good coffee, but fake beans. We'll go with that. We have a very special guest for this episode. Author, journalist, filmmaker, the lot, ex Vice Chancellor, Gavin Esler. Did I get that right, Gavin?
Ex-Chancellor of the University. The Vice Chancellor does all the work and the Chancellor just waves at people and says, you're doing very well.
Perfect. So what, have I left anything out? Is there anything that we need to know about you, Gavin, that I haven't said?
Probably, but I'd best keep it all hidden.
Yeah, so we're talking today about a topic I think that's close to your heart, which is the truth or lack thereof in the public sphere, especially with politicians these days, and that sort of thing. So maybe we can talk about what you say about that in your latest book, Britain is Better Than This.
Yes, I mean, there's a entire chapter about that, which begins with the phrase "dead cats," strategic lying, and truth decay, and those are three of the phases of how we are becoming indoctrinated by lies in public life. So the dead cats is something that Boris Johnson wrote about in 2013. And I think it's very interesting that Boris Johnson wrote about it in 2013 in the Daily Telegraph for reasons that listeners can make up their own minds about. But he wrote about it because a friend of his, as he puts it, who we know is Linton Crosby, an Australian friend who is actually a kind of guru who helped get him elected as mayor of London, said to him, when you get into trouble, Boris, and you don't know how to get out of it, you throw a dead cat on the table. Now, by that he meant if you throw a dead cat on a table in a discussion, everybody's going to say, oh, there's a dead cat on the table, and ignore exactly whatever you're talking about. And so it's a distraction technique. And in fact, quite interestingly, the current president of the United States, when he was running for his second term, Donald Trump, he talked about they're eating dead cats in Ohio. Migrants were eating dead cats. So he was talking about taking it literally. So this distraction technique, which Boris Johnson used all the time. So a good example of it is on the Brexit bus. It said, we pay £350 million a week to the European Union. Why don't we give it to the NHS instead? Everybody knew that was a lie. They knew it was a lie, but it was a lie. It was a dead cat. Everybody starts talking about it and they go, well, if it's not 350 million a week, it must be something. So we were talking about that. So that's part of it. Strategic lying just means telling lies as a strategy rather than as a mistake. So I spent a year of my life on one lie, which was Bill Clinton saying I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. Now, he got in real trouble with it. And of course he should have gotten in real trouble with it. Actually, in the end, although he was impeached, the impeachment proceedings failed, and he ended up his second term as president of the United States more popular than when he was first elected. Because people, you know what? Everybody listening to this is a liar in some way. We all lie. And one of the most obvious ways we lie is if you order something online and there's a box at the end that you have to tick to say you've read the terms and conditions. There is nobody listening ever who has ever read the terms and conditions. I checked for the book how long terms and conditions are for some of the things that I was buying. I can't remember what it was, but it was 30,000 words.
Nice.
Hamlet is shorter than that and much more interesting.
It's a novella,
So we're all lies, but strategic lying is really important. And then the Rand Corporation in America talk about truth decay, and what they're saying is that we've got an erosion of truth in our public life, and it's really, really damaging. And I think that's where we come in now, because we all get that now, but you have to see that it's not a mistake. It's actually deliberate.
It's a strategy. I had a question about that exact kind of, because I've been reading around what you say about it, and I kind of see where you're getting at in terms of it's a strategy and it's deliberate, but also a thing that you've said is that part of the problem is that we're not being educated as critical thinkers. We're not able to really sometimes tell what is true and what is not. And I think when we talk about truth, you're meaning acting ethically and morally, and because you have different definitions of the truth. But so it's a kind of a chicken and egg thing, really, isn't it? So you have politicians lying, and then you have kind of institutions not teaching people critical thinking, or do you have institutions not doing that, and therefore politicians like that can arise? Where are we coming from with that?
I think there's two parts of it. One part is more difficult to solve than the other. Politicians are lying, some of them. Some of them lie constantly, so that if Vladimir Putin told the truth, he'd probably have to tell another lie to get himself back on track. And actually, I could say that about British politicians, but Putin is not going to sue me.
So there we go.
Some of the British ones might. And that is one of the problems. But that's them.
Yeah.
What about us?
Yeah.
So what are our responsibilities? Yeah. And part of it that astonishes me is that people are prepared to believe what is clearly nonsense.
Yeah.
And that is very, very difficult. Now, humans have always believed in strange things. We've always believed in witches and supernatural beings and all that. And we tell each other stories and fantasies, and we get that. But when it comes to modern political life, there's an old Marx Brothers saying, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? Why don't we believe our own eyes when it is obvious that this is happening? And so one of the things I say is we can do something about them in a democracy, the politicians. We can vote out the liars after calling out the liars, but that's not happening very much, unfortunately. Yeah. But what about us? And for us, how do you teach people to think critically? How do you teach children to do it? And one of the suggestions I come up with is to teach media literacy in schools.
Absolutely.
Because it happens in Finland. Yep. And in Finland, people trust the media more than British people trust the media. I mean, actually, we decline in trust in the media in Britain has been measurable, but still the BBC is the most trusted, and we do better than some other countries. But that's not great. And Finland, they teach, kids love it because they're asked, here's a newspaper article or here's a TV broadcast. Who is this person telling you this? Why would they tell you it? Are they qualified to tell you it? Are they making a story for you to wrap yourself around? And children love that. Why don't we teach it?
And there is a set of guidelines you can just use like that go boom boom boom. Like you say,
exactly.
Who are they? Are they qualified? In what context are they? I remember, just as you say that, I remember doing my liberal arts degree, my English literature degree. In the first year, this is part of what the teaching was, and this was just with the Open Uni. And I think it's very relevant to the Open Uni because it's online, and it talks a lot about online critical reading. And it talks about, I can't remember the exact set of guidelines, but it's something like what you've said. It's what does the website look like? Does it look professional?
Yeah.
First step. Who's actually writing it? What is their intention? What's your intention? All the rest. But I think, but teaching it as kids, I think, would be a much more powerful thing.
And they may be better at it than we are, because we get in ruts, and also things are very much more complicated now. I mean, we've all seen some of the fakes on Twitter and so on. Yeah. And they're amazing. Yeah. They're absolutely amazing. You see pigs doing jumps off high dives and triple flops and things into the water, and you think, that looks like a real pig.
Believe your own eyes.
So we are becoming more suspicious, but then that's the other part of it. The other deleterious part is if we actually suspect everybody of everything, then you never can possibly trust. And that's what we're seeing. The erosion of trust in public life is the thing that really motivates me.
Yeah. We talked about in the previous episodes with Edward, and I would like bring you this question as well. Is we've noticed, not just us, but in Italy, because sometimes we think that the problems there on this island, they're just here. Sometimes we're a little bit insulated, but the same problems we have here, they're happening in Europe as we speak, in all the countries. Kids, but increasingly adults as well, there's a sort of functional illiteracy going on. Well, people do read, but they cannot comprehend the meaning behind the text. So yes, they are functional in the sense they can read their bank statement, they can read their favorite newsletter, they can absolutely do everything, but they cannot read the intentions and the meaning behind the text, both with books, with movies. They're being conditioned and trained not to think.
Yeah. And then how do we actually critically listen to people in power then?
Yes.
If we can't even watch a movie.
We are being educated to a reality that doesn't exist. So we're literally living in virtual reality, aren't we? So instead of, like Gavin used to say earlier, we're not respecting our own experience. So when we start school, but increasingly during this period, both in Europe and in the UK, there is a tendency to putting each one of us against each other. So you end up both in private and public schools. So in Europe, we have private schools as well, but not as many. But you do well when you do better than the others, don't you? So you end up at the end of a school, you want to find a job, and that mindset carries on. You end up in 30, 35, 40. If you've done well, you're like, okay, yeah, I've done well. I've done better than the others. I've done well. That mindset. So my question to you, Gavin, is, and I'm sure you've already explored this, is can we ever produce good politicians when you get to the top and your mindset has been always being in competition with the others? So can a person at the top, or even not at the top, ever have in their interests other people's?
Well, I think that is the question of the day for us and every democracy. And I would say that the short answer is no. I would hope that I'm wrong, but the reason I'm saying no is this. If you look at who cut, we're all time poor. Most of us don't have enough time to spend reading lots of newspapers or getting lots of news sources and thinking that through. So those who practice the politics of distraction, who are entertaining effectively, and Trump is an entertainer because you never know what he's going to say, and what he says today is different from what he says tomorrow, and he gets away with it because that's factored in. And so in the case of Trump, I think the only thing that will cause him real difficulties, I think, is if the bond market turns against him and the economy of the United States becomes a mess. Because that's the one thing that everybody can see, even though he claims he's the most successful. If the Dow Jones and the FTSE here and other stock markets, if there's something, a kind of objective correlative that you can say this has gone wrong. Whereas at the moment, everything is, I'm going to bring about peace in 24 hours, which he didn't do. So the distraction works, and it works I assume it works in Italy. It certainly works in Britain. I thought Nigel Farage's Reform Party did brilliantly in August, because August is the silly season. There's very little politics going on. Political journalists are desperate for something. When did they hold their conference? The end of August. So they got a huge, you can make up your mind of what you think about that, but it was a brilliant piece of how do you cut through this? So we get the politicians we deserve, but unfortunately, what has happened is the words democratic recession are real. And just to take, for example, the British Conservative Party in the 1950s had 2.8 million members. 2.8 million members. The Labour Party had about 1 million members directly and a lot through the trades union movement. Now, the current leader of the Conservative Party was elected by 59,000, I think it was, fewer than 60,000 votes of members. Fewer than 60,000 votes. 130,000 could have voted, and even some of those who could have voted didn't even vote. Now, if that is the degree of apathy within a political party, then it's hardly surprising that 40% of British people don't vote. The same is true of the United States. I don't know how it is in Italy, but actually people are going, they're all the same. Well, they're not all the same. But what that sort of means is, I think they're all the same because they're all useless. And the one other thing I would say is, this is called apathy, usually. I don't think people are apathetic. I think they're just turned off. I think they do care about their children's schools. I think they do care about how much they earn, how much tax they pay, about getting involved in foreign wars. But they don't see most of us, most, quote, normal people do not join political parties because we don't think that's for us. And it's boring.
Yeah. There's a big danger, because we were talking about it the other day as well, didn't we? That we're being conditioned, we're being trained to be dull, because we have no more discussion on the judicial system. You know, now it's been taken as a fact. It's just you just accept is what it is, and not even the political system is being challenged anymore. We're just happy with the way it is.
Well, we're not happy with the way
no,
it is.
but we accept. We just do not take the there's no more bravery. There's no more willingness to discuss and debate if the current political system structure is still valid in today's time. Maybe it is, but there's no more discussion.
Yeah.
We are happy to be turned off. Like in the UK, you know, we in Italy we call it constitutional monarchy, while in Europe we have a republic, don't we? Both of them have their faults, but to me, it looks like we are happy in the state that we are, and when we are so attached to the current system, but the present just flows through, we are bound. We are bound for self-distraction.
I think I would take it a step further in that we're not maybe kind of happy or even content with the current system. I don't even think most people even think about the current system, and that's the problem. Like you're saying, maybe it's apathy, and maybe it's active kind of taking yourself out, but you're either actively or passively not thinking about that which is basically in control of most parts of your life.
Yeah, and I think there's two bits here. One is, I think, a general bit for all of Europe and elsewhere, which is people don't feel they've got any agency to change things. That's part of it. Yeah. But in Britain, and maybe other countries are the same, we have this absolute nostalgic delusion about the British system is the envy of the world, which is nonsense. Because, there's not another country in Europe that has the first past the post system except Belarus. So we're the envy of Belarus, are we? And Belarus isn't working too well. It's just my view.
Yeah.
And also, we have a system in which it's okay for Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, for parliaments there to have a proportional representation system, which is not perfect, but at least if you're the Greens or you're a very small party, you've got a chance of getting somebody who represents your view.
Yeah.
There's no system that's perfect, but the delusion about the British system, and also actually the self-serving nature of it. I asked, this was about 4 or 5 years ago, I asked a couple of former very senior civil servants why Tony Blair did not change the voting system for the United Kingdom when he was elected in 1997. And one of them said to me 179. And I said, sorry, what are you talking about? And he said, that was Tony Blair's majority. If you've just spent your whole life in politics trying to get a massive majority, you're not going to overturn it by changing the system. And he said, one of them said it was something like, if you've just, climbed a tree, you don't chop it off underneath you. And so the same is presumably true of the current Labour government. They know the system is rotten. They know 40% of us do. I mean, just look at the figures. This drives me mad. In the last general election, Labour won 2/3 of the seats and 1/3 of the vote. But 40% of people of voting age didn't vote. So they actually won with about 20% of the voting age population, has given them a landslide of 2/3 of the seats. And that would have been true of the Conservatives a few years ago too. So this is not a political system that we can be proud of. It doesn't represent many people. And a lot of people say, my vote is a wasted vote. And if you feel it's a wasted vote, why would you go out in the rain to vote?
Yeah, absolutely. Proportional representation is, we have that in Ireland as well. And it's seen as better, but the situation in Ireland isn't that much better.
I know,
because everybody's in power.
Everybody's in power, and nobody's in power.
Except Sinn Féin. As long as you don't have Sinn Féin, it's fine that everyone's in power. But this is the thing. Like you said, you did say, there's no perfect system, but there's no perfect system that has been used yet.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we kind of need to. So we talk a lot in Buddhism and things like that about attachment. We're attached. We're conditioned to be attached to what is.
Yes.
Because that's all we know.
That's all we know.
And by definition, you can't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
But all of the other possibilities exist out there. The solution exists if you allow yourself to forget your conditioning and be open to it. But I mean, it's beyond the scope maybe of normal things.
But conditioning was very, like we said in the other episodes, people like to call themselves expat. In this country, I'm an immigrant. So, people like, I'm an expat. No, you're an immigrant. If you move into another country, you're an immigrant. So I'm an immigrant. I'm in this country.
My family emigrated from Germany in the 17th century to England because they were religious refugees. So I think I'm trying to point out that actually, if you really wanted to stop the boats, you can stop the Romans 2,000 years ago.
So I saw and felt with what was happening during the Brexit times, during the referendum. And I always like to point out that in mainland Europe, referendums on these matters are not allowed because the founders were aware of the fact that a political party could have manipulated or used general consensus as a way to break the system. Now, whether the founders were conscious of this, I don't know, but there was definitely a goodwill behind it, which is exactly what happened in the UK. Now, a thing that really rubbed me was we will take control of our border. Now, in Schengen, you already had control of your border because UK was not in Schengen. So you had the right to get people from Europe, myself, Italy, and ask them, you can only come over if you have a regular contract of work, and you could even set all the parameters you wanted. So you had full control of people that were coming in your country. Yeah. And you also had full control of people coming outside of Europe. It was just never enforced. And the public was conditioned in thinking that this was not possible. But the UK has never bothered to set parameters for Europeans to come over. I came into this country and I was never asked to show a regular work. I was surprised I had it, but I was surprised that I was never asked to show a regular. So it's the results of, decisions, but the public was not informed. Now the big question is, did it need to be informed, or are we just used to have all the news from the TV and take them as granted? This is what we're talking about
today. That's a good question.
Because it is the responsibility of the individual to know these things.
Well, there's another part of that which I've been exploring in some of the other things I've been writing, which is about what is Britain's immigration problem? What is it? Because everybody says we've got an immigration problem, but what is the problem? Is it we don't like people of color? We don't like Muslims? Is it that we don't like people who are unqualified? Is it that we think that some people will become, we've heard that apparently they're all rapists as well, which is quite astonishing, given that the number of people arrested at anti-migrant demonstrations who have been in the past had a history of spousal abuse or domestic abuse is quite high. So what is the problem? So I talked to a couple of migration experts. There are these people who study it. One is called Hein de Haas. He was at Oxford and he's now in Amsterdam. I've talked to a couple of them. And essentially, if you ask, what is the migration problem? One of the answers is not the numbers. The numbers are big and we can argue about why it's so big, but it is that it is very easy for instance, Nigel Farage to get on a boat and point at boats in the channel near here and say, this is the problem. Because everybody understands that is a problem, that this shouldn't be happening, and that people who are risking their lives and their children's lives on the sea, I don't know which crimes they're committing and so on, but they must be very desperate. But this should not be happening. There should not be people coming on boats with criminal gangs. And that is why where the politics of distraction comes in, because it's so easy to get on a boat here, to go out and point at these people coming and say, this is our problem, because it is. What's much more difficult is to say, we've got an aging population. Do we have certain skills? Yes, we do. But do we have people in relatively low skill jobs that British people tend not to do? Where are we going to get the people from? And we are going through a period that has echoes of the 1960s, and Powell, when it was, there will be rivers of blood if we let all these people in from the Caribbean who are now, and also from Asia, who are now, their children and grandchildren are generally real contributors to this country. And it was true of the 1930s when it was Jewish people who were the target, the black shirts, and Mosley. And curiously, one of the papers that said hurrah for the black shirts in the 1930s was the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail was a big supporter of fascism in the 1930s. Curiously, the Daily Mail today, of course, wouldn't be a supporter of fascism, but does take a particular view about migration and goes on and on about it in a quite inflammatory, in my view, way.
I think this country is capable of fantastic integration. Has done successfully more than so other countries in Europe. Because in Europe, in Italy, we had sort of ghettos. We had France. Don't even let me start. The parts of France, from immigration from Tunisia, Algeria, that they literally made a lot of football players come from those, and they still have traumas about it where they grew up. Germany is, my brother, he lives in Germany. German system, fantastic, but that's starting to showing big cracks as well. But in the UK, especially during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I don't know if you ever noticed, but the council flats and the council houses were always put in nice boroughs because they knew that those people eventually will. This is the way you integrate. There was a long-term planning with it. You integrate. Kind of rich community, like well-established community, and then you put council flats and council houses strategically in those points, so those kids will grow up with, the kids that they're local, and eventually you just simply integrate because this is our nature. We want to.
This is conscious and policy-driven rather than accidental. And
it was. How we're doing it today, that's another story. Because it was done well. They knew exactly what they were doing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when we had, people from the Caribbeans, and then we had people from all over when we had the big from Syria, from Germany. They knew exactly what they were doing. But now we are reaching capacity, I think. But then are we? Because population is aging, and so
capacity for numbers or capacity for tolerance, perhaps.
But again, it's like Gavin said, it's a smokescreen that the politicians put up.
It's a dead cat, isn't it?
So
I think the Farage thing is really clever, though, because like you said, it's entirely true to stand at the shore and point at the boat and say that's wrong.
Yeah,
because it is fucking.
It is wrong.
It's completely
totally wrong.
You cannot have people being trafficked by criminal gangs
in broad daylight that you can see coming to our country. I agree.
With that kind of level of risk, that's awful. But what he doesn't say what he means is wrong. Is he meaning they're coming into the country and that's wrong, or is he meaning they shouldn't be on this boat under these conditions for these criminal gangs? That's wrong. This is the clever thing he's doing.
But it also elides those people who are clearly desperate. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. But it elides those people with other people who come here to work. And the other thing is, we're in Kent. The number of people who used to come as seasonal workers from Eastern Europe to pick apples in Kent and go home again because that's how it works. Whereas now, if you get here, you're not going to go home. One of the things Hein de Haas, this migration expert, said to me, which really stuck in my head, is I said, what should you not do to control migration? He said, the worst thing you could do is build a wall. And I said, but Donald Trump's just saying he's doing that. And he said, well, it's not entirely perfect, but that's what you're doing. But he said, just to take the American situation. Now, I'm sort of quoting him. I hope I'm getting it completely right. He said, vast numbers of seasonal workers used to come from Mexico, mostly actually Mexicans, but some from other places in Latin America, as seasonal workers to California, Arizona, New Mexico, and so on, to help with the harvest or help with cattle drives and so on. Then they take their money and go home, and they come back the next year. But you build a wall, anybody who gets in isn't going to go home.
So it's a barrier to get out.
It's a barrier to get out. And the people who think it's a barrier to get in have been proved wrong because people can get around it if you're desperate. But once you get in, you're not going to climb over it and get out.
Get back. That's interesting.
That's exactly what I was talking with you the other day. Like, if you are Mexican, or even if I come from Europe and I want to illegally enter a country, I'm not going to try climb a wall these days, am I? What I will do, if I want to be really naughty, I would take the plane, I enter the right ways as a tourist, and I overstay.
Yeah. And in Britain, it's very difficult to check on you because we have a very casual economy. We have a kind of, I don't know whether you call it a trusting economy. We just employ people and we pay them in cash sometimes and certain jobs and working behind a bar and fairly low paid jobs. And after a while, you learn to work within the system.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was at Kent Life yesterday. I was having a look at have you been to Kent Life? Oh, it's fantastic. I was looking at the old hop pickers' houses from like in the kind of 19th century, late 19th century, there were these brick-built stables essentially, but then later they were built out of corrugated iron. But I was reading about the historical description of what they would look like inside. And the Londoners who came down to Kent to pick the hops were
migrants.
Immigrants.
Should have sent them.
They were called immigrants. They were right. The word was immigrants. So what? Let's have a look at one of these immigrants' rooms. Yeah. They were migrants. They were.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be a joke.
No,
but
it's
true.
Yeah.
Well, there you are.
The wording, yes.
There you are. Yeah. And then worse, the Irish came over.
Absolutely.
And then the Scots came down.
To build the country.
There's quite a lot of Scots, actually old Scots, who came down to the mines here.
Yeah.
Because probably there were troublemakers in the mines in Scotland. Exactly, I don't know, because there was a lot of labour unrest. That's really called migrants.
Immigrants, yes.
Immigrants from London.
From London, the Londoners.
Now they're called VFLs, down from London.
And they were integrating kind of culturally with the culture of the Kentish people. So because obviously we were farther apart because it's hard to communicate and whatever. You were seen as a cultural migrant, or a financial migrant, or whatever. Yeah, I thought it was interesting.
It's interesting how also, being from Italy, immigration has always been a wild card for the politicians, right? So every time you have a problem or, you play it as a wild card. You play it the way you want it. So immigration in Italy has never really actually been a huge problem. Why? Because Italy always acted as a corridor. Yeah, people weren't really staying in Italy. They were using Italy as a corridor to go to other countries like Germany, UK, France. So they were bouncing back, but they weren't really staying. Apart from people from the east, like Albania, they actually stayed in the country. So I love, as much as I didn't like Berlusconi, he came up with something wise once in a while, being a businessman. So once in a while, he was coming with something that actually made sense. And I remember I was little, so I imagine I loved it. I grew up with Berlusconi. I remember his bald head, just
all I remember is bunga parties.
But he used to go to the European Union, and sometimes he was making sense. He was saying, why are we not trying to help these people in their own countries? So they don't need to come over. So all these massive budgets that we have, why don't we use it and spend it? We already have companies in Northern Africa, and like Algeria, Morocco. Why are we not helping them? Why are we not sending this budget to help them out? So they, because these people do not want to leave their countries, really. They're forced to.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so if we help them in their countries, then eventually we will not have this problem. Why are we not helping them? Because it's convenient to do so in the current moment. And I don't know if you remember Gaddafi, Berlusconi used to have nice ties. Italians always had a nice deal with Algerians, because first they supply gas to us. And that didn't bode well with the European Union because during the gas crisis, the Algerians said the Italians looked after us when we had the civil war. So now we want to sell gas at the lower prices to them only. And then, of course, that the European Union caused the scandal. Yeah, that caused the scandal.
Yeah.
But same thing happened when Berlusconi did a nice deal with Gaddafi, saying immigrants were not coming for 2 years in the country. No single immigrant came into the country for 2 years. But that did not bode well with the European Union. Because you cannot have deal just with one country and we can't. Because Spain has similar problem with these outposts in Northern Africa.
Morocco and
France. So that did not bode well with the European Union. So are we being hypocrite? 100%. Because there was a key to solve it. If we wanted to solve it, right there was a key. Because if it's a problem of the European of the Southern European states, it's a problem of all Europe. Because eventually they go everywhere.
But the thing is, there's no real problem with them anyway. I think this is what we're kind of glossing over a bit as well. I mean, the problem is not necessarily the movement of people, because the movement of people has happened throughout history. And if you want to be literal enough about it in a grander scale, there's no difference really between people, right? People are people. I think the problem is the ideas, and it kind of brings me to a question I did want to ask you actually about. You spoke about in one of your earlier books about the kind of narrative of politicians and how they create narrative to get power. And the story that's told, or the story that survives, is the one of the winner. So whoever wins, that's their story. How do you square that with the narrative of truth decay? So if they're telling a story, if their job is a narrative creator, in order to do, maybe it shouldn't be their job, but it is, in order to stay in political power, they get power. 50 years later, that's the truth.
Yeah.
I get your question. I think it's a very, very good question. Let me answer it with a specific example. The example would be Bill Clinton. One of the things I said, I did a book called Lessons from the Top, which was based on leaders that I interviewed. And what struck me, and it was like a bolt of lightning at the end, I was trying to think about leadership and what is leadership. And then I realized I was doing it the wrong way. It's what is storytelling about leadership. So what stories do they tell? And once I thought about that, I realized every single leader tells tells a different story, but in the same way. They tell a who am I story, and then they say a who are we story, which could be a who are we as a political party, who are we, Berlusconi told, who are we as Italians. And then the final thing is, you bought into those two stories I've told you. The third one is where I'm going to take us. And in Berlusconi's case, it was an interesting journey. And so Clinton is very, very interesting, because his who am I story, and this gets to the truth, his who am I story, I literally bumped into him in the street in New Hampshire before he was running for the presidency. He was out jogging. And I recognized him, and he heard my accent. And I said I was working for the BBC, and we started to talk. It was quite clear what was going on in his head. I'll get to that in a second. But one of the first things he said to me was, I'm just a boy from Hope. Hope, Arkansas was where he was born. When I went to Hope, Arkansas, they were very proud of him. Very, very proud of him. But they said he did most of his growing up in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is just down the road, and was a bit of a gambling town because there was more jobs there. Now, he was not lying, but he told a story, and it was an accurate story, and it was a perfect story for a presidential run. And then he told a story about who are we, which is, we're not the old Democrats, they're rubbish. We're the new, he didn't say that, but that was the implication. We're the new Democrats. And George W. Bush said, we're compassionate conservatives as Republicans. And I said to somebody, what's a compassionate conservative? And the guy, this was a Republican grandee, a very old guy who was brilliant. And he said to me, compassionate conservatives, what that means is anything we were in the past that you don't like, we're not that anymore. And anything we were in the past that you do like, we're still that. And that was the same as New Labour, new Democrats, and so on. So where this goes to truth is, these are not people who are lying. These are people telling a selective story, and we all do that. And I think that's absolutely fair. The fact that I can now, with the benefit of hindsight and experience, see through it is fine. It seems to me they weren't lying. But what really annoys me is when we are told barefaced lies, and they get away with it. And that is the fact that you can't call somebody a liar in Parliament is possibly a good idea, because they might be doing it all the time. But they are economical with the truth. Let's put it that way.
But being economical with the truth is Bill Clinton saying he's from Arkansas.
And then there's the real lie.
I'm from California.
Exactly. And I flew around the moon on a banana. I did actually. Honest, trust me.
But then that goes back to individual responsibility and critical thinking, doesn't it? Like,
but we don't all have the time to check, and that's why the changes in the media are so potentially disruptive. There's always the kind of biased media, the newspapers who do the party line of their the person who owns them. But checking and fact checking now is so difficult sometimes.
It is.
Yeah.
And even when you do it, some people don't believe, the facts themselves.
Going a little bit off topic, just for briefly, we were talking in the car on the way about truth and things and critical thinking and teaching kids, but it seems to be more that it's a feeling that you need to investigate. If you feel that it's not quite right, then you investigate. I think if you're open to your actual feelings, if you go, this feels like it's true, then you probably don't have to do, because we all know what a lie is.
Yeah.
We look at that bus and say, that's not true.
You're going to say another word, yeah.
That's not true. And you know it, and then you maybe fact check that one. Whereas they go, we can have blue passports. That's true. Yeah. And then it's true we can.
Yeah.
It's not true we should, but that's okay because it's true. It's
true.
fine. So I think there's a lot to be said about perhaps just it's hard to teach, which is what we were talking about, but teaching ways to be a little bit more able to listen to your own wisdom, if you like. And this is kind of where we usually come from.
And that is the key, it seems to me, because what we don't want is to live in a society where everyone is suspicious of everybody else. One of the great things about British society, which I also found out in my research for Britain is Better Than This, is we trust our governments a bit less than many other countries, which I think is quite healthy. But we trust each other more than I think any other OECD country. Perhaps, I'm not sure, one or two are fairly trusting as well. And I say I say this quite a lot to audiences. I've just come back from 5 days at Book Festival in Scotland, and I know that if I dropped my wallet in the Book Festival, it would be handed back to me. I'm absolutely sure about that. Yeah. And actually, on the street, in a small Scottish town, I'm pretty sure, not so sure about London, but actually, probably most people would pick, I would think 9 out of 10 people would pick it up, find the address and do something.
Yeah, I think
positive.
Yeah.
So we do trust each other, and we need to trust each other, but we need to be very skeptical.
There's one question I wanted to ask you. As you know, the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, she used to be a journalist. And she was famous, I remember as a kid, she was used as an example to grind down politicians. She used to attack them until they would get the truth out of them. Do you think it's the journalist's responsibility to do that?
Yeah, I do. I do. I don't think there was one of my colleagues at the BBC who used to quote a famous senior figure at the Times newspaper who used to say every time he did an interview with a politician, "Why is this lying bastard lying to me?" Now, I don't, there's a little bit of that. I think there should be a little bit of that in all of us, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because but you could put it more politely. Why is this person trying to sell me this thing?
Yeah.
Is this something I want to buy? And is it going to work?
Yeah.
And that goes for the car that's sitting outside where you kick the tires. And you should do exactly the same with a politician.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not kick the politician, by the way.
Probably not kick their tires, but yeah.
Well, actually, there's a few that maybe I'll change my mind on that.
Gavin, thank you for today.
Not at all.
Normally, towards the end of our podcast, we do a little section, Ed's notebook, where Ed writes small notes regarding today's topic.
This is my research notes, and these are the things we didn't talk about. Okay.
Ed, what have you got for us today?
So we've covered most things in the notebook. I had one or two little quotes which I had added in just because. So we had the British Constitution is a metaphor. This is maybe a quote, maybe not a quote of Gavin's, but it came from one of your talk. Merely what those in power choose to say it is for their own convenience. And I like that, but I worry about truth when that's the case. And then
so do I.
So I had a quote from Nietzsche, which was linked to this, which is truths are illusions, which we have forgotten are illusions. And I think that kind of covers the Constitution nicely, because we've forgotten that it's an illusion. And then I had another quote which I thought was interesting for the whole talk, which is from Hannah Arendt: "The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is people for whom the distinguish between fact and fiction no longer exists." And that she was talking about Nazi Germany and communist Russia in that. And I worry that that's where we might be going if this truth degradation exists.
I'm a huge fan of Hannah Arendt, and I think that I have that quote in my head all the time when I listen to people talking. I think this is really serious if people cannot distinguish fact from fiction.
So we all have a job to do, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you for today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and please do comment if you don't agree, because you do know that we like always a good disagreement.
Awesome.
On the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you, Gavin.